Hello campers and welcome back to Camp Indiana 2021 Summer! Today we are talking all about Hoosier Hollywood Squares, and the person we're talking about today is Bob Ross. You know, he's become a household name with his happy little accidents, but did you know that he had an Indiana connection? He's not a native Hoosier, but he did spend quite a bit of time here in the Hoosier State. Bob Ross, he grew up in Orlando, Florida, and a lot of the time when he was growing up, he cared for sick or injured animals. And he spent a lot of his time outdoors and loving nature. In fact, some of the animals that he took care of while he was growing up in Florida are featured in the show, The Joy of Painting. Bob Ross joined the Air Force when he was 18 years old, and he was stationed out in Alaska. In Alaska, Ross learned how to paint from a TV show. This is where he learned a style of painting called alla prima, which means wet on wet. This type of painting means that you could complete a fancy oil painting in nearly half the time, about 30 minutes, and it would still look really good. And Ross used this technique to paint the Alaskan countryside. He sold these paintings and made enough money to retire from the Air Force. So when he left the Air Force, he returned to Florida to continue his paintings. One of his really good friends convinced him that he was good enough to have his own television show where he taught other people how to paint. The origins of The Joy of Painting are not really known. However, the first season was filmed and produced in Falls Church, Virginia, and the second season was, all the way up until the end, was produced in Muncie, Indiana. So right on here in Funcy. By the early 1990s, The Joy of Painting began broadcasting throughout the world in such places as Costa Rica, Greece, the Netherlands, Turkey, Iran, and Japan, as well as tons of other places. Now, Bob Ross was known for using oil paints in his work. And when the show became popular, he was able to sell his own line of oil paints. So I think you could go to the Hobby Lobby or to the Michaels and pick up some Bob Ross branded painting supplies. You can even watch The Joy of Painting on streaming services like Twitch or on YouTube. They have a whole bunch of episodes that you're free to watch. And you can find more than 1,000 paintings that he has created for the television show The Joy of Painting at the Smithsonian. Now, I love painting and I love art, and Bob Ross he's always been really important to me throughout my life, because I remember watching The Joy of Painting on PBS when I was a little girl. And I loved painting, I love art, it's one of my favorite things to do and escape, and really how I like to be myself. Now, I'm no good at oil paints. I don't have the time or the money for oil painting. One of my favorite things to do is watercolor paints. So I've created a tutorial for all of us to do together where I can teach you how to paint something using watercolors. Now you can use the simplest colors. I used my regular palette, and we're going to create today our state seal, all in watercolors. It's super fun, it's super easy, and you can make it your own. So I'm going to move us on over to my tutorial, and I would love to see how you guys create the state seal. Go ahead and post it on our social media. Love to see how your watercolors turn out. Thanks. Bye. Hello campers, and thanks for joining me as we paint our state seal today in watercolor. As you can see, I have already sketched out some of the big shapes and figures that I would want on our state seal. I've sketched those out in pencil. I have gone in and filled in where I want my sky, just with water, with no paint on it whatsoever, because as I go in with the paint, I want a nice light wash of blue to be a beautiful sky blue. And the best way to dilute the shade of a watercolor is to just add more water. Now, an important thing about watercolors is you need to let them dry in between layers. So you'll see we'll fade out and we're fading back in. I'm getting ready to do these green hills. our nice blue sky is already dry, so we're not going to have green bleed into our blue. Just taking a dark color green right here at the top of these hills, and I'll go in with some water to just blend that green down the picture. And if you add a little too much water, that's a-okay. You can come back with a paper towel, as I'm doing right here. I added a little too much water for my liking, and I've dabbed it away with a paper towel, and I'm going back in with that green just to add a nice top of the hill, and I will just blend that down with more water. Next, we're going to go into the bison as the tops of our hills dry. Now I'm using short strokes when I'm taking this brown, almost like I'm just dotting the paper over and over again with little tiny polka dots. This is going to add a nice texture to our bison to make him look like he's covered with fur. As I said, the more water you have on the brush, the lighter the color will be. So right now we're just putting a first layer onto our painting. I'm going to come back later once this color has dried and add some more texture to our bison. But right now I think he's looking pretty nice. I love that light brown. Add a horn. What about his back legs? Of course, I'm making his back legs a little darker, give him a little bit of shadow. I'm gonna go back in with some green and start to fill out the background for my bison in the foreground of our painting. Now the foreground is going to be a little bit darker. It's going to be shaded because our bison is going to be jumping there, and then of course we've got our log in the foreground as well. So we want light or more water in the back, and I've even used a yellow, and I'm going in with a brown to make it a little bit lighter. We want it to be sunshiny, like the sunshine's hitting the prairie, and nice warm tones. Spreading that water around. We don't want a whole bunch of puddles when you watercolor, because that's where a lot of colors can collect. It just looks a little muddy. As you can see, I've caught myself, I've put in a little water into our still wet bison, and he's starting to bleed out into the prairie. I'm gonna go in and save that real quick with a paper towel. Just soak up that water. Decided to let that dry. And we're back. I'm gonna start blending out that background of our picture with some more water, filling in the foreground with a darker green. Just being very careful around our bison so he doesn't bleed anymore. And if you've noticed, I'm using short strokes like this. Make it kind of look like a natural texture. The best thing about painting things from nature is that it doesn't need to be perfect straight lines, because nothing in nature is perfect straight lines. So it's okay if you mess up just a little bit. We're just using our short strokes to give it texture, and like I said, once again, when this dries, we will go in and add another layer to add some more texture and depth and shadow to our painting. We've got the dark green down here at the bottom, and I'm filling that in with those short strokes. It's nice and shadowed. I'm even using the very tippy top of my brush to almost make it look like grass. I'm being careful to work around my woodsman that we have on our state seal. I'm not quite ready to work on him just yet, but I am going to fill in with some nice greens. I've warmed up my green by mixing it with a little bit of yellow and a nice brown. So I've got 2 trees over there as well that I'm working around. Everything's starting to come together as it looks like a prairie. Even start trying to add some maybe wild reeds down here with the tippy top of my brush. I'm doing longer strokes because those, of course, are going to be bigger. They're closer to us. We're back from letting the paint dry, and I'm going to go in with this beautiful sun. A nice, beautiful yellowy orange sun. It almost looks like an egg yolk there in the sky. Fill that in carefully, and I'm just going to let it dry as I blend some of that shade around. And we're going to go in and I'm going to do the trees, it looks like. The trees, I'm just going in with a brown, long strokes. I'll paint that in. And you don't need to be very detailed with the branches of your tree because we're going to be covering it with some beautiful leaves here in a little bit. You know, if the paint's darker, that means I don't have a lot of water on my brush. Sometimes I do want it to be a little darker, so I'll just wipe my brush on a paper towel and pick up some more paint. Yeah, the trees aren't looking very happy right now, but just wait until we add some leaves and some grass around there. Since I'm working with that brown, I'm going to go in to do this log down here that our bison is jumping over. Just blending out that brown shade. Just some water. The nice thing about watercolor is if you find something that doesn't really work for you, you can pretty much easily fix it with just adding a little bit more water to it. We've let that dry, and now it's time for grass. I've switched to a little bit of a smaller brush here, it looks like, or I'm about to. Yep, there we go, here I switch. Just a little bit of a smaller brush, same shape, and I'm going in with the greens, and I'm going to start adding grass. So the grass towards the bottom of the picture, because that's what's closest to us, is going to appear bigger than the grass towards the back of the picture. It's also going to be darker because it's shaded in by the log. So I'm just using a dark green to add some texture, just some short and long upward stripes, lines that look like grass. I think the best way to describe how this motion works, of course I've got the video sped up, is just kind of like a zigzag. Use a very quick zigzag with your paintbrush. If it's not perfect, don't worry about it. Nothing in nature is perfect. Add some grass around the top of that log, around our bison's feet. I've used a little bit of a warmer color to paint in around the trees. As you can see, adding grass is really kind of turning the picture around. It's starting to look more realistic, this texture. And as I add more grass further back into the painting, I make the strokes a little bit shorter than what I normally would up close. Also make them a little bit more faded since they're farther back. We're just using an awful lot of grass. I have gone in with a yellow, maybe to warm up that grass color, maybe to add a different kind of grass in there. You can do whatever you'd like. Maybe you want to go in with a brown and maybe add some sticks. That would be really cool. And mix some yellow and brown to make maybe like some dead grass around. Add that around our woodsman. It also shows that the grass has maybe gotten too much sun. It's starting to bleach it. We're coming back. I see some lines I wasn't really quite happy with. I'm trying to smooth out with some extra water. Once again, I'm being very careful not to break into my woodcutter just quite yet. Put too much water on the page, so there it goes, it's off. I love the way the front of our picture is looking right now. Next, I'm going to add a couple trees in the background over here. The dark brown. They're going to be little, they're off in the distance. And I'm going to go in with that brown to add some more texture to our bison. I like to use that very pigmented, not a lot of water brown to give him some depth as we painted his head, his legs. He's super cute. I'm giving him his little tail as he's hopping over the log. And just those short little polka dotted strokes to kind of make it look like he's got fur. Now it's time for our woodsman. I'm giving him a pair of black pants. I'm using that really tiny brush that we have so I could get in with the details. And now I'm not really good at drawing people, but that's okay. If you get the idea that it's a woodsman, I've done my job. So he's got himself some black pants, and I'm giving him a nice, pretty blue shirt. His arm is raised as he is wielding that axe. Maybe he's chopping down that tree to make a new house, make a barn. And there's his little axe. Trying to add his hat, and I think I made a mistake. I'm gonna let some of that dry before I come back for his hat. And here we are. I'm starting to add the leaves on the trees. We've got that beautiful dark green, and we're adding it with our larger brush. But the technique here is to take your tip and put it down on the paper and then lightly press down so you have a nice leaf shape. And just keep pressing those on top of each other as you move, and it looks like a tree. It almost adds all of the shadows and highlights for you. How nice is that? I love when my paintings work for me. I'm coming back to these two little trees we put in. I'll make those maybe pine trees. Nice triangle shape over here. I think I'm gonna go add some more leaves. I go in with a yellow here. There we go. The sun, of course, is hitting those leaves from that side. It's looking good. I think it's time for me to add my woodcutter's hat. There we go, back with the little brush. Easy peasy. And there you have it. I'm of course going to add a couple more details, but I think it looks great. I would love to see your pictures that you paint of the state seal if you followed our tutorial today. And thanks for joining us. Can't wait to see you next time. Bye.